In this tutorial we're going to start with a conceptual mass, and what we're going to do is create a rectangular extrusion and dimension it. So let's use the mass template that you're just given with Revit Structure or Revit Architecture, as both have the same massing tools. So what we're going to do is, like I said, create that rectangular extrusion and then add structural properties. So let's start with the rectangle, and we're going to go create form, and you're going to see it extrudes this item for us. So we're going to start dimensioning it. So first you need to choose your reference plane, which is very important, and we're going to go create align dimensions, and we're going to dimension between faces. So let's start with the east-west face, and for the elevation we're going to go top to bottom face, and then escape out of there, and we need to choose the perpendicular reference plane to create the last aligned dimension. And so it doesn't matter where you place these dimension lines. I'm just going to select them, and in the modified dimensions toolbar under label we're going to add a parameter, and call this span north south, and we're going to make these instance parameters under the group dimension. And the reason we do this is so that every individual massing can be updated with the east-west spans and the north-south spans. So we're going to call this span east-west. It's also dimension property, and it's going to be an instance, and we're going to make our elevation a type parameter so that we can have a few massings and control them. We'll call this elev height, control like multiple heights. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and save this family, and we're going to use this, we're going to bring it into our project. So we already opened a new project in Revit Structure, which we're going to use for our project because we want to add structural elements such as beams and columns. So we're going to start in our level 2 view, and we're going to make our grid, which will be a useful tool in placing our beams and columns. So we'll just make a simple 3x3 grid. Doesn't really matter the spacing, we can do that with our dimension tool. So we have our simple 3x3 grid. Let's come to our 3D view, and you're not going to see anything because the grid is in the elevation and plan views. So we're going to come to our architecture and site. I'm going to hit show mass so we can see the mass that we're about to place. Hit place mass, and it's going to ask us to bring in the mass we're going to bring in the mass we just made because we hadn't actually loaded it in yet. So we found it, and we're going to bring it in, and you're going to see our mouse icon is going to turn to this little do not enter sign because we didn't actually make a face yet, but we do have work planes. So we're going to select place on work plane, just zoom out a little bit so we can see the whole thing. It's great. Just place it, and let's go back to our level 2 view. And move it closer into our scene. That's great. And if you remember when we draw these, there were those blue lines that came out, and the reason we have that is so that when we drag one of these, they all stay pretty even, and it looks really clean right there. I like that little feature. So what we're going to do now is align our grid using our modify ribbon, we're going to go to align and just set up so that the outer grid lines up to the mass, and you select the mass edge first. See how that didn't work out? What you want to do is when you hit align, you want to choose the edge of the mass. You want to go what you're lining to first, and then what you're lining second. Great. So now we have our grid set up, but it doesn't look quite right, so let's annotate it with some align dimensions. And what we're going to do is make those equidistant, which is a nice feature, and that'll stay equidistant. That's a constraint that we just set up by hitting that button, and wow, they were actually pretty close. So now we have our grid set up. Let's come home, ribbon, and let's place some columns, and we're going to put them on the grid value, on the grid, and it's wherever the grid intersects, it's going to place a column. So we're going to select all of our grid lines and hit finish, and you'll see that you can't really see because the grid's in the way. But if we just highlight one of them, go over to the binoculars and isolate category, you'll see the 9 little lines which make up our column grid. So let's go to element properties by selecting them all and right clicking, and we'll see that it goes from level 1 to level 2, which is a constraint on the column, and it moves with grid, which is very important for us. So now let's bring back our grid. Oh no. Let's reset temporary hide isolates, and let's bring in our beams. Now we're going to do this much the same way. We're going to select on grid, and it's going to go ahead and put beams in between where we have columns. So all we have to do is select our grid again, and you'll see the little values showed up. We can hit finish. Oh. And we'll come back and let's look at our 3D view. And you can see we placed our beams and our columns within our massing. So if we come to our east elevation and we highlight our mass and go to its element properties, let's say the north-south span is a little large. Let's make it 200 by 200, and we have to go to our type dimension parameters to find our LF height, and 90 is a bit large for a 2-story building, so let's make it 15 feet, and hit OK, and you'll see our mass updating, and there it is. And let's bring these elevation lines outside. You see like the grid lines, they update together. Great. And now using our modify line, we can move our grid and it updates all our members, and we can even change the height, and since they're constrained between level 1 and level 2, we're back with this. And if we want to keep updating the mass, we can, and just keep aligning our grid to update. And there is our final product.